What's up, guys? We're trying something new today, and that is drive homes with Ben. So drives home from the gym, whatever it is. Fuck, already ran into an issue. All right, hopefully it won't tip over. You're in the side car door handle deal. So here's the deal. I think I want to give more value out. Rather than just videos of my lifts or maybe tidbits, maybe there's some value I can give more in a bit of a long form or a few minute form content. So that's what I'm going to try to do today. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is my experience with FAI, femoral acetabular impingement. And I've made a short on that before, kind of what I was going to do and kind of experimenting. But I'm at a point where I feel like I can confidently give an update and actually provide some insight, because I've experienced a ton of relief with some things that are kind of counter to maybe the common narrative surrounding the condition. So to give you a synopsis of how I've dealt with it, or at least my experience was that maybe starting kind of my freshman year of college, I just started to experience a little bit of anterior, like front left hip pain, which for a couple years I basically thought was just something related to my hip flexor, whether tendonitis or some soft tissue deal in there. And what that eventually evolved into was the summer after my sophomore year, I was doing this movement called the Deed squat, also known as like the Cal Deed split squat, and there's videos of that on my channel. But I think lifting in that internally rotated state essentially made my anatomy, which was already predisposed to some impingement, it made things worse unknowingly, to the point where whenever I would move in certain ranges of motion, I'd feel this like bump, kind of like almost like going over a speed bump in my hip, and it just wouldn't feel good. And my theory is that impingement, which developed from essentially making my musculature lift in this internally rotated state constantly, then led to this impingement. So played through the fall with it, that my junior year of college, and continued to play in the spring. And it was a thing where like my hip would just kind of be sore all the time, but it never really prevented me from doing anything, and I just kind of lived with it. And eventually, I saw the team doctor, because I was like, well, I might as well, see somebody about this, because it's kind of like been happening significantly for like over a year. They said it was soft tissue. I saw a doctor back home for an inguinal hernia, and then they took some x-rays of my hip and told me I had FAI. And basically was like, you want an arthroscopy? And I was like, whoa, I came here for hernia evaluation. So fast forward a little bit, after I got my inguinal hernia repair, I saw another doctor for a second opinion, who was supposed to be more conservative, told me I would need a paraacetabular osteotomy, which is basically where they cut off your hip bone and rotate it, because I have retroverted hips, and that would be on top of an arthroscopy, which the first doctor I said suggested, which is basically I have cam impingement, which is where the head of my femur isn't completely circular, so they would essentially shave the parts off that would be supposedly impinging or causing the issue. Saw another doctor after that guy, who he referred me to, and they were hip preservation specialists, and then said I would need, it's a team of two guys who said I would need to cut off the head of my femur and the head of my tibia to rotate it, because of the way my anatomy developed due to my hip retroversion. So are these guys bad? No. Are all surgeons bad? No. But one thing my thought is that surgeons want to do surgery, right? Or at least when they see an issue, that's the way that they are going to, that's the lens through which they're going to think to address it. Now, in some circumstances, I think surgically going through procedures is the way to go. And for instance, if I went on the track that I'm on, which I'm going to tell you about in a sec, so just hang on, and I did continue to have a lot of pain and didn't see issues, I'd probably get the arthroscopy. And maybe in 5 or 10 years, if things degrade, I'll get an arthroscopy. which would be like the level 1 out of the 3 levels of the surgery that I just outlined, which would be essentially shaving off the cam impingement and a labral repair. So basically here I am. I know I have some tearing in my labrum, which could be anything from fraying to a significant tear. I don't know, but that's the case in my left labrum. I have some pain, right? And I'm like, yo, I got 1 or 2 more years of lacrosse I want to play. I don't want to get a hip surgery that's going to sideline me for a minimum of like 4 to 6 months. And I'm going to have to like readapt to this new range of motion. And it's like, whoa, right? This is like a terrible time to have this realization, or, you know, to being told this is what I need to do. So what I did is I looked really heavily into some conservative therapies. I tried some PT, which was not, it helped a little bit, and it made me think of the idea of symmetry and what might be, you know, perhaps I have some strength imbalances, like my glute maximus on my left was weaker, and so was my glute medius on my left, and on my right, where I have problematic issues on my left. So that was helpful, but it wasn't like game changing, right? But then what I got into was these guys at Upright Health and something called the FAI Fix, which basically opened my mind in consuming a lot of their content, which kind of gave me the perspective that, one, FAI isn't a death sentence in the way, meaning that you need to get surgery. It's not a surgery sentence. It can be pretty much resolved completely through conservative means, and some of the mainstream conservative therapies aren't exactly the best suited for the condition. And what this led to was a period of several months and still ongoing trial and error to figure out what muscles are problematic, which ones I need to essentially stretch and lengthen, and which ones I need to strengthen. And it's got me to a point now where there are basically 2 stretches that I can do, which are stretching my adductors and then doing like a pigeon stretch from my outer hip, glute medius, piriformis, that sort of thing, piriformis. Stretch that, do some monster walk, and I'm basically good. I just deadlifted 635 pounds, sumo deadlift, without any pain. Hip feels fine. I'm sitting in the car, right? I'm actually going into ranges of motion, a deep hip flexion, doing something like an ATG split squat. So I've experienced a ton of relief and a ton of reduction in pain, which is relief, but increased ranges of motion and just function, and being able to function at a high level, being a college athlete, without any surgery, right? And this is with an existing labral issues and apparent anatomy that is so problematic it would require I don't want to say life-changing surgery, but like sideline me for 8 months plus probably surgery. So what I've learned is, here's my new take on FAI. What I believe is that these bone shapes make you more at risk to develop impingements. Now, I think the surgeons would agree with that, but I think what the mainstream surgical view of it and whatnot is that these impingements, it's kind of like you're just going to develop it regardless of what you do, right? Like if you're an athlete. Now, my perspective on it is that there's a ton that you can do to make sure that you don't, or if you do, you can reverse a lot of your issues, basically give you a normal hip function. Now, the way you do that, and I think why these things happen, is that when you play sports constantly, you're just trying to get stronger. You're not thinking about, oh, my mobility is lacking here and there and whatnot. And eventually, in the pursuit of just trying to get strong and train really hard and be a better athlete, you end up with a hip that is more or less being pulled out of whack and pulled in directions that are essentially is going to make that potentially problematic anatomy that has basically stuff sticking out that might bump into other things. It's going to make it more likely for that thing to bump into the other thing. So what you do is first improve your mobility a lot. That's what I've done. It helped a ton. And then secondly, you have this newfound mobility, and you then strengthen the muscles that are going to make sure that things do things stay in the direction that's going to not impinge. So, not exactly the most groundbreaking thought there, but it's kind of counter to a lot of the mainstream medical advice, which is basically like, you're effed, you're done. You're going to get it. There's not much you can do. Whereas I believe if you increase your mobility a ton and particularly train in ways that are going to make sure that this doesn't directly just butt in to the roadblocks of your anatomy, then you can still train at a really high level. Like for me, I went from a conventional deadlift, had some impingement symptoms, went to a kind of mild sumo deadlift, now practically no pain, right? I'm doing the ATG split squat, which involves really deep hip flexion, but I'm doing it in kind of a staggered stance, whereas other people who maybe had anteroverted hips or normal hips could just be forward and back, right? And I guess the other thing to... My main takeaway with all this is that I think people might say, you're not designed to squat. You have bad hips, all this. I wouldn't say that's the case. My belief is that in a modern world where our baseline movement and the things we pursue basically put us in a place where things are going to move out of whack. We're sitting a lot. We're playing sports and training really hard, and maybe only be going in certain ranges of motion and putting our body under a lot of stresses that it's designed to handle, but maybe, not meant to, I guess, I don't know, maybe not with all the sitting or not doing the same movement for 6 months at a time to where things tighten up and your hip capsule gets pulled forward and then it's impinging on your acetabulum rim. So that's my thought process on it. And the last thing I want to say in this long video is that if you have hip impingement, FAI, a labral tear, right? If you're an athlete and you want to get through these next few years and you're like, man, I'm screwed. I've barely broken the depth chart up to this point, and I'm trying to get to a point where I can perform at a really high level and be the player I know I am and all this, but I need to get this surgery that's going to silence me for 6 months. My point is, do your research, talk to somebody like me, look into something like the FAI Fix, and really evaluate, how is my general hip function and mobility, right? Is my pigeon stretch so bad, like I can't even do it? Or are my adductors so tight? Or is the glute medius on my left side so weak that, just super weak, whatever. This is a long video, but I'm trying to give you a little bit more of a genuine conversation here for the 8 people that are going to watch this one. So I hope you found some value in that. Let me know in the comments if you have any specific questions off what I said. And maybe if this video has some interest, I'll actually show you my hip warm-up routine to basically give somebody who was told that they would need a paracetabular osteotomy and arthroscopy and then potentially cutting off the head of my femur and tibia and rotating them, to where I'm functioning at a really high level, getting stronger and faster and practically no pain at all, just with a specific warm-up after a lot of work, of course, mobility and strengthening in certain ways. So maybe I'll share that if this gets some response. So that's my video. Drives Home with Ben, Volume 1. Doing a little Sam Sulek deal here, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of room for real content out there. It's not just like edited and whatnot, and actually really more so a conversation and trying to be like, hey, I hope you find this helpful. So I hope you found it helpful, and have a great rest of wherever you are. And if you made it this far, you should definitely like and subscribe because you obviously found this interesting and valuable, and maybe I got more to give you. So that's the deal. Peace out. All right, bye.